Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Hazard in Hawaii, a Dr. Danger mystery by Heather Silvio, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Traveling to Hawaii to solve an unexplained overheating death had to be the most creative excuse for delaying the completion of my dissertation. This case would be a wild ride, I imagined. And then I'd finish my dissertation on the paranormal and mythology. One day soon I'd be Sarah Danger, Ph.D., but right now I was Sarah Danger, private investigator assistant. A giggle threatened to erupt at the craziness of being flown to Hawaii by a client. Freaking Hawaii! Would you like a complimentary Mai Tai? The flight attendant balanced her tray of red-orange tropical cocktails and gave us a big smile. Her bright red lips were the only makeup on a youthful face surrounded by curly black hair. I ran a hand through my long wavy auburn hair, wondering how it would be if it curled like that. Definitely, I enthused and carefully received the fruity-smelling concoction from her. We'd been flying for over 10 hours, traveling from Tampa to Hilo via Los Angeles and Honolulu, and a refreshing alcoholic beverage sounded heavenly. My seatmate didn't respond, surprising me. Jeff? Sure, he finally replied, giving the flight attendant a tired smile. His head shook for a moment before steadying, and he took the offered cocktail. Don't give me that look, he admonished me as the flight attendant continued down the aisle. It's just jet lag. I narrowed my green eyes and considered my boss. Jeffrey McCarthy, 54 years old, with disheveled graying brown hair and a bit of stubble on pale skin that made him appear unwell. I supposed it might be jet lag. Although the teal-trimmed seats were comfortable as a larger ex-athlete, he looked a little squished. I, on the other hand, fit fine. There had to be some benefit to being child-sized. After all, I stopped growing at the age of 13, but the hours of travel across multiple time zones could exhaust anyone. Why don't you review our case before we land? He said into my silence. Then we can lay out our plan of attack. Got it, boss. I opened my laptop and clicked on the JM Investigations folder. One more click on a folder labeled Andrea Helms, and the case opened before me. Such that it was. Andrea knew Jeff from church and knew he was a private investigator. Yesterday, could it have been only yesterday? Andrea called Jeff in a panic about her little brother Cameron living in Hawaii. Cameron had told her he'd read a story about a man in his town who died from overheating. The man's hypothermia had no external cause and responded only minimally to medical attempts to cool him. Cameron was worried because he'd noticed he'd started having some serious symptoms too. He'd reported feeling warm without exertion and with the air conditioning running normally. That soon became sweating, clammy skin, and nausea. He thought it was a flu bug until he saw the article and something clicked. Andrea swore her brother wasn't a hypochondriac, and the doctor in the article had been baffled by what had happened. So, when she heard the worry in his voice, she told him to go to the hospital, where he was now being treated by the same doctor who saw the man who died. And then she called Jeff. That's what we had. Andrea's concern, her brother's symptoms, and a single newspaper article about a mysterious hypothermia death. Not that I'm looking a gift trip to Hawaii in the mouth, so to speak, but is this a case for us? Jeff slow blinked before responding. Honestly, not sure. That's why we're going to check it out, determine if it's an unusual case. That was code for unexplained, likely supernatural case. And he was right, which of course was why he'd accepted the case. Do you think she wants someone there to keep an eye on her brother? Normally, regardless of a possible supernatural element, we'd make a bunch of phone calls before flying halfway around the world. Except Andrea had told Jeff that she would not risk losing Cameron, her only remaining family. She'd rather spend the money and look foolish than risk his life. Jeff, being a sucker for a sob story, took the case even though it seemed medical, and there would be nothing for us to find. Possibly, he conceded. Though it is bizarre. I opened the electronic file of the newspaper article that had triggered the frantic phone calls. Alan Richards had gone to the emergency department, reporting an unresponsive to over-the-counter medication fever. When the nurse first took his temperature, it registered as 104. They tried cooling blankets, IV fluids, and antibiotics, assuming they'd reduce the fever, assuage his concern, and send him home. Instead, his temperature continued to rise, topping out at 110 before his insides boiled and he died. I gulped some of my tropical cocktail, trying to tamp down a phantom bit of heating, enjoying the feel of the cool liquid down my throat. The article reported that the medical examiner's office would perform an autopsy and take tissue and blood samples to determine the underlying cause of death. Possibly by the time we landed, they'd already know the cause and the mystery would be solved. I wondered if we'd get to turn this into a little vacation. If so, hey, it took me 32 years to make it to Hawaii. Wanted to enjoy it. What should we do first? Jeff asked. I smirked at his obvious attempt to get me to take lead. He often told me how great my analytical mind was, though much of it had to do with my ability. Since I was a kid, I could sense the emotions of others. I thought I was just highly empathic, and that lots of people were like that. Over the years, and in particular once I went through puberty, it became clear it was so much more. According to my mother, and confirmed by internet research, I possessed clairempathy. It's in the realm of clairvoyance and is another form of extrasensory perception. It wasn't solely an empath's understanding of another. Others' emotional and physical experiences overwhelmed me, and I only distinguished them from my own with serious effort. The ability fully developed once I reached adulthood. It could be pretty freaky, to be honest. My mother taught me to keep an internal wall of protection built at all times to limit people's experiences day to day. With powerful reactions, though, that wall developed gaps or even crashed down. Anyway, Jeff planned to retire so he could spend more time on a not-yet-purchased boat and wanted to gift me the business. But I wasn't a licensed private investigator, nor was I interested in being licensed. This was a fun side job to pay for expenses while I earned my degree. It had helped me pay for my master's in counseling as well, so Jeff and I had known each other for over 6 years. The obvious place to start, I humored him, would be with interviewing Dr. Michael Wilhelm, the doctor who saw Alan Richards and is now treating our client's brother. Then our client's brother, Cameron Helms, and finally the surviving spouse, Helen Richards. I ticked the 3 off on my fingers as I listed them. Then we see where we are. A flight attendant's voice sounded over the loudspeaker, asking everyone to be sure they'd stowed their carry-on articles and to prepare for landing. Perfect timing, Jeff said with a wan smile, and perfect plan of action. I returned his smile before shifting my gaze past his face to look out the window. The turquoise water mesmerized, a beautiful sheet broken up with tiny white dots that became clearer as cresting waves. Soon that became a vibrant green, the land undulating with what appeared to be hills and valleys. When I thought of Hawaii, I pictured white sand beaches and smelled the scent of coconut. But we were landing on the big island of Hawaii, home to the active volcanoes of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park and Mauna Kea, the highest mountain peak in the United States. I'd been fascinated to learn that the big island of Hawaii was spelled the traditional Hawaiian way, while the state itself remained the federally recognized Hawaii. At the sight of the high mountain peaks, all linguistic ruminations fled, and I wondered how close I would get to the lava of an active volcano. An involuntary shiver rolled over me at the thought of the heat and power.